The start of the new school year can bring stress and anxiety, especially for parents and students living with ADHD. Dr. Zoe Martinez joining us live with some advice as families get back into their school routine. Dr. Martinez, good morning.
Good morning.
So each year, thousands of adults with ADHD go undiagnosed, and stressful times like back to school can be pretty challenging. So how can parents manage stress while preparing their student for a new school year?
I think the most important thing ideally is that people have some recognition of what they're struggling with and that they're working with a clinician. Doesn't necessarily need to be a psychiatrist, and it doesn't mean that people always have to be on medicine. So that's the first thing that I want to say. There are lots of other strategies about being organized, about having outlets for activity, exercise, all of those things. I think sometimes people worry that everything's about medicine, and that's not. It's more about just knowing what your challenges are and figuring out the best way for yourself and your family to organize and prepare for those.
So as a parent, what would be a sign that our child may be dealing with ADHD, and what resources are available to deal with that?
So for many children, if they're in school, that probably teachers and others, other individuals in the school might identify that a child is having trouble. The most obvious symptoms can be disruptive behavior. So kids who are obviously hyperactive and impulsive, running around the classroom, those kids have probably already been identified by teachers, and parents have already been talked to. The more subtle things are a kid that maybe isn't doing that well, and it's kind of surprising. They're an intelligent kid, but they're not getting their work done. They're not doing well on tests. Your kid that always forgets their backpack at home and constantly loses their jacket. So those can be more subtle signs of ADHD. So they're not really disruptive.
So what support do kids need, especially those with ADHD, as they head back to class?
So, again, the most important thing probably, even though I think parents worry about having their kid diagnosed, but it's probably getting the diagnosis and then asking for accommodations at the school, which can be like a 504 plan and individualized education plan, depending on what the needs are. But children are all entitled to, by the federal government, an education that supports them. So if they're in public school, they're entitled to help.
So what's your advice to parents that are facing financial stress with back-to-school gear and shopping supplies and things like that? What would you advise parents in that regard?
I guess make sure what's actually needed. I don't think that there are special funds necessarily that would help with the financial stress of buying supplies. Again, it depends on someone's financial situation of what might be available in terms of gear and those kinds of things. But I think it's more about having realistic expectations. So, the list of things maybe don't need to be quite so long. And I do, probably youth won't like this, but if there's a budget thing that needs to be cut, it might be personal electronics.
Right. And so one last question for you. We only have a few seconds left, but what would you say for a kid that maybe is dealing with some separation anxiety heading back to school here for the first time?
Figure out whatever it is that they're allowed to have in school that might make them feel a little bit more comfortable. Some of those things, a lot of kids now, for example, are allowed to have fidgets or other things that just, if they're anxious, they have something to play with and they're allowed to have that.
Dr. Zoe Martinez, great perspective. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.